Hello, Will Hutton here, from Former Leaders
I think your podcast is particularly timely.
to Leading Thinkers.
We have lots of academics who've looked at this in real detail.
I've gathered some of the best minds in social science to help me explore the research, evidence, and policies that could shape the world around us.
You have to be prepared to take risks.
So why not join me as I discover the big ideas that could shape the way we live? This has been extraordinary. Subscribe to the We Society now on Spotify, Apple, and all good podcast platforms.
You're listening to The Conversation. Over the past year, staff working in Australia's needle and syringe programs have noticed something unusual. They've been overwhelmed by demand for a thinner type of needle. Not to inject heroin or methamphetamines, they're being used for peptides. Some of them, like Ozempic or Mounjaro, have been approved for safe use if they're prescribed by a doctor. But then there's retatrutide.
Retta is the greatest drug that there ever was.
Thinking about starting Retta, listen to this first.
I just had someone call me and said they spent $350 on one vial of Retta.
So how did a drug that's still in clinical trials become part of a thriving grey market for peptides? I'm Gemma Ware, and this is The Conversation Weekly, where experts explain how we ended up here. Timothy Piatkowki, you're a senior research fellow at the University of Queensland in Australia, and you've been tracking the peptide and enhancement drug market for well over a decade. So this drug, retatrutide, what lengths are people going to buy it? Is it a crazy hard thing to access on the black market, encrypted app type affair? What's going on?
No, and that's the thing with injectable peptides, right? It's just so easy. So I literally went straight onto Instagram, an ad popped up, and there's a link to WhatsApp, and you click it, and you're immediately, bang, in contact with someone. And I've said, hi, I'd like to buy some retatrutide or whatever. And then they're just back to you pretty instantly, sending through price lists and then tell them what you want. And easily, in under a minute, you can have your order, payment done.
Wow.
And, you're ready to receive your package.
Wow. Was this targeted advertising?
I mean, my algorithm would be a little bit skewed towards this kind of stuff, but I've heard comments like as soon as people speak with me or have an interest in enhancement substances, I do hear comments where they just go, oh, Tim, you messed up my algorithm, because they'll start getting them, but all it takes is them looking up one thing. So yeah, definitely targeted, but I think insidiously targeted, right?
What were you actually offered and how much would it cost?
So there was all the way from 10 vials through to, I think, 100 vials there were the options. When you order illicit peptides, they come in a little vial. It's a freeze-dried or lyophilized white powder, and you will get some instructions about how you can reconstitute that powder. So you use bacteriostatic water. So water with benzyl alcohol in it, so it doesn't build up bacteria in the vial. And sort of swirl that around. And then you're able to draw that out and inject it subcutaneously, so generally around that belly button area. And in terms of cost, I mean, cheap, very, very cheap. Like at 10 vials, you're looking at under $50. I think what stung us the most was the postage, which was $100 plus. But this was cheap, and just overall, the pricing is pretty cheap for illicit drugs.
And just to be totally clear to any law enforcement people listening, you didn't actually click buy, right?
I did not follow through with the purchase, and nothing arrived at my place.
And what did they tell you about where the drug had been made, these vials of retatrutide?
So instantly, we assure you that this is 99% purity. I obviously was after some more intimate knowledge, so I asked for pictures of the factory and videos from the factory, and can you send me some photos of your product? And the other thing that they sent through was certificates of analysis, assuring me that these are highest standard peptides and 99% pure and everything else.
And are these factories legitimate, or are they dark factories?
So a lot of these factories are producing legitimate active pharmaceuticals and medicines and other ingredients for businesses worldwide. And so some of these are raw powders being produced, raw peptide powders or compounded peptides being produced for people who are using them. There's also a space where these are diverted from where they should be going by people who are looking to make an extra buck and get them into the consumer's pocket. And then I also think there is another group of factories that are producing these with the pure intention to do so illicitly.
Fake versions are already being sold, raising serious safety concerns as the drug maker calls on police to intervene.
So most of us have heard of peptides like Ozempic and Mounjaro, but this one you were offered is new. Tell me more about it.
So a peptide is a signaling molecule within the body. It encourages our body to produce a downstream action. But when we talk about peptides today, we're really talking about synthetic peptides made in a lab that people are ingesting. I guess a really, really easy way to conceptualize this is when we talk about peptides, we're talking about it's medicines. Insulin was one of the first peptides synthesized, and that is a medicine that saves lives. Similarly, we have, as you said, Ozempic, Wegovy, semaglutide, and we have tirzepatide, Mounjaro. Retatrutide is a newer GLP-type drug. Currently, they've just finished up and published out of some of their phase 3 trials. Rather than just acting on, I guess, one pathway, retatrutide is, say, stronger. It acts on 3 pathways. And so people in those trials have gotten far more effective weight loss than those using Ozempic, for example.
So who's actually buying this stuff?
So what we've seen, I guess, both within my research as well as our phone line, we have a phone line called Steroid Connect. People can call up and speak to one of our peer educators, and we've seen this year alone over 170% increase in the number of callers calling us about their illicit peptide consumption. A lot of people who call up the phone line, you'd think there'd be like a specific typology. Not at all. It's all kinds of people. We have young boys, 16-year-olds who are calling up saying, bought some retatrutide. Can you help me on how to safely use this? We have dads, mums, people 30s, 40s. We had someone who was 70 call up the other day. It is a very diverse group of consumers.
And why are people, do you think, so willing to buy this drug which is not licensed, which is still experimental, rather than approved peptides? What's making them make that choice?
So obviously I could go to my GP and I can ask for weight loss medications. I could use Ozempic off label. There's a lot of cost preclusivity there. I would have to go and pay for the consult. Maybe there's any blood tests or other testing necessary, and then the medicine as well. Online, I'm paying a fraction of that cost.
Okay.
And I don't have to deal with any of that, right?
Okay, so just to be very clear, it's illegal to buy this drug, and it's also illegal to use this drug in Australia, right? So why is it so easy for people to get their hands on it?
A lot of these illicit markets operate transnationally and globally and very much digitally mediated. So for us to try and enforce this or I guess crack down, that would require harmonization of law enforcement powers to come together, get organized, and then where people are storing such vast quantities, because a lot of this isn't stored onshore necessarily, and a lot of this is through online orders.
Coming up, it might be easy to get your hands on these unregulated peptides, but it's definitely not safe. Welcome back. Tim, we know at least half a dozen people in Australia have been hospitalised after taking drugs labelled as retatrutide in the past 6 months alone.
The Chief Health Officer has issued an urgent warning about an unapproved, potentially toxic peptide product.
What kind of risks are people exposing themselves to here?
There are a few side effects that patients or participants experience. A common one is increases in heart rate. Another common one is gastrointestinal upsets. And a third common one is increases in liver enzymes. And so that increase in liver enzymes is the one that I'm really interested in, I think is relevant here. Because on our phone line, quite often what we hear is that people struggle to calculate their dosage. What we find is a lot of people end up overdosing in terms of what they intended to put in. A lot of people find it challenging to move from the powder, which comes in a milligram dosage, to then milliliters when you reconstitute it, to then drawing and injecting, which is in a needle, which comes in international units. So we've had instances where people have called and ended up with significant pain and not been able to go to work for 4 days or needed to go to hospital. And certainly the hospitalization cluster around liver injury, I think, is partially related to the fact that these enzymes are being elevated so much further due to people overdosing rather than using the correct doses of the trial. And I think there's probably a relationship there that we need to look into, which is why it's so important to give people harm reduction guidance.
How can we be sure, though, that what's on the label is actually what's inside the vial? Is there a risk there too?
No, you can't be sure at all. One of the streams of my research program looks at testing and reporting on enhancement drugs, so peptides being one of those. And of the peptides we've tested, retatrutide included, these substances hugely variable. We've had peptides which had absolutely nothing in there. So one of the vials had water.
Wow.
All the way through to one of the retatrutide vials that we tested had 190% of what it should have had in it. So it was meant to have 10 milligrams. It actually had 19 milligrams in there. We did also pick up traces of heavy metals in the testing. So in the retatrutide, there was traces of lead. Now, that lead didn't exceed permissible daily limits in that you'd have to inject, I think it was 2 or 3 of those vials in a day, so quite a lot. But lead in larger quantities over a longer period of time is a carcinogen, and there are a number of other issues that can come from that. That's just one example, and so we are testing a lot more to see whether that changes, but I think that's definitely one of the serious concerns.
Is it difficult to test these peptides? I've heard it's a little bit tricky to actually figure out and to do it. What are the challenges?
Yeah, very much. We enlist analytical chemist expertise, and the equipment you need is quite expensive. We're talking multi-million-dollar lab. And so to do that in terms of actually testing per vial, along with labor and other things, you're looking at hundreds to thousands of dollars.
Should authorities be cracking down?
I think this isn't a public health issue that we can regulate our way out of, unfortunately. I think there's 2 reasons. I think one, it's past that. This is very, very much embedded in not just Australian culture, but also worldwide. And 2, I think we've seen from, substance use and illicit substance use just generally that prohibition isn't necessarily the best strategy. So there are a few different levers to pull here. One of them is the harm reduction aspect, so ensuring that people have safer use guidance in terms of injecting, etc. Another one is around that literacy piece that I spoke of, so demonstrating to people that these 99% purity claims aren't true, showing them through some of the objective data that we have and assisting them to make, these considered decisions around what they're reading versus what is actually fact. And then, of course, upskilling our clinicians and health workforce and putting this on policymakers' radars in terms of how we look at harmonising our health sector responses to make sure that we don't end up with more of these hospitalisation clusters.
So is there anything that can actually be done to control the market, the selling online, this e-commerce business in these unapproved substances?
Social media platforms and regulators can certainly look at curbing the way that advertising occurs and the way that this influencer marketing is happening. So apart from the ads that I spoke about, obviously there's probably some regulations that could occur there and be strengthened. But there's also these influencer sort of marketing pathways where there's people who will inject on a story or a reel or whatever else. And then they'll say, this peptide, I lost a bunch of weight, the Retta was great, or my skin's glowing from these other peptides, and pop into the link in my bio and here's a 20% discount.
Retta really improves your life in every single aspect. A compound like this is really life-changing, and as always, if you need... I
think there's probably more that could be done around that, because it's conflating subjective experiences with advertising and not being completely upfront about it. And I think it's really, really important for us to be transparent, especially with substances that carry risks.
What do you fear could happen if it goes unchecked?
I guess we've seen some of those consequences already. We've got instances where people do end up in hospital. We do have instances of people calling the line. There is a risk of a whole new cohort of people who inject drugs, and those people aren't exposed to necessarily safer injecting advice, so bloodborne virus prevention, preventing bacterial infections, reusing needles, things like that. And so for me, I guess one of the obvious public health challenges that could come up is that we have a high propensity of people having redness, swelling, injury at the injection site, and then all the other host of health complications that actually come with the peptides themselves.
Is this just a retatrutide problem, or will we see a wave of new experimental peptides being sold online in the next few years, do you think?
No, definitely. This is just one new example. I think we see people and hear about people. Definitely, I see it online a lot. People are excited about GHKC for promoting skin health and collagen synthesis and making you beautiful. We see peptide stacks, combinations of 3 or more peptides in the one vial that promise super recovery or super beautiful skin or whatever else. And I just think that is going to continue to grow, and we're going to see many other illicit peptides emerge, each promising some other exciting new thing, right?
We appreciate your time, Tim.
Thank you.
Retatrutide is being developed by the pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly. On its website, the company says that retatrutide is an investigational molecule available only to participants in Lilly's clinical trials, where its safety and efficacy is still being evaluated. The company goes on that retatrutide has not been approved by any regulatory agency and says no one should take anything claiming to be retatrutide outside of a Lilly-sponsored clinical trial. That's it for this week's episode of The Conversation Weekly. You can see screen grabs of Tim's exchanges with the peptide seller in a fascinating visual story he's written for us about the experience. It's on our website, theconversation.com, and we've also linked to it in our show notes. Isabella Podwinski was the writer and executive producer of this episode. Sound mixing is by Michelle Macklem, and our theme music is by Nita Saal. Ashlyn McGee is our head of editorial innovation, and Misha Ketchell and Stephen Kahn are our editors-in-chief. The Conversation is a non-profit news outlet dedicated to sharing the work of academic experts with a wider audience. If you like what we do, please support us at donate.theconversation.com. Thanks for listening.